AM 1450 WDLB's Insight program and it's almost impossible to get away from the. I've reported and just been talking about some national news stories here. The protests that have been going on across the nation, including those even in our community. The law enforcement, I'll go that far, policing world has been under a microscope here, and joining me in studio this morning is Assistant Chief Pat Zepps. Good morning.
Good morning.
Your department here this past week or so has taken a little different tact and become proactive in meeting the people before. There have been protests, or a protest at least, in the city, but you've been proactive in trying to meet people on their terms, whatever you want to call it here, I guess. How do you look at your community event?
Yeah, I think the community event was great. Personally, it gave me an opportunity to just go down and listen and talk, and we had a lot of officers go down there, which was great. The community turnout was fantastic. Feedback's been great. It was really nice. We just mingled with the crowd and kind of threw ourselves out there. Had some good conversations, some tough conversations. Tried to deal with some perceptions, on our end, and answered some tough questions. So overall, I think it was a great event.
And those questions, give me an example of some of the things you may have talked about with some people.
Well, we talked about, we were posed the question, do you think that you have problems in the Marshfield Police Department? Do you think, how would you address that if you did? And, do you believe in the concept that there's systematic racism? And so those are some of the things we talked through.
I've talked to the Marshfield PD and Wood County Sheriff's Department on the program here, and I've gone into length at times about the mental aspect of the job that you have, because you deal with people usually at their worst. I mean, events like this, you try to do it at a time when there's when you go home at night, it's hard to leave behind the type of things that you see in your career.
It certainly can be.
And I've talked about that with you and the local sheriff here in Wood County many times. I mean, how do you wind down? And I think your departments have been doing things like this, whereby you are standing there with a uniform and a sidearm, but is there anything to be had, that is it helping?
I think it absolutely helps. And one of the things that we have to remember as police officers is that we have an obligation to humanize the badge, and that's kind of a popular departments and areas. And what we need people to see is in a light other than getting stopped or being called there. So if we can increase those public interactions that really stem from a good place, people can start to see us in a different light, and I think that's what that event was. One of the things myself and Chief Gramza did was the protest before that took place downtown on Wednesday. Made it a point to go down there and talk to as many people we could, just be present, support their right to protest, and let them know that we were here as we can to open lines of communication. And I think that's another opportunity for them to see us in a different type of light. So I think anything we can do that shows us or shows the community that we're more than here to stop you and write you a warning for your taillight or whatever it is, can be helpful in the long run.
In Stevens Point, they have had I guess I say a little larger presence or protest, and they had some, for lack of a better term, agitators that were coming through, and also legally, I think, doing some other side, if you will, of that, letting other people know that they're there as well. And the Stevens Point Police Department has asked Marshfield PD to become the investigators of that incident. What can you tell me about what's going on there?
Very little at this point. We were provided the case file earlier this week, so we're just taking a look at it. There were some reasons and some potential conflicts of interest as far as why they wanted to mediate that out to another department. So really, as far as the details of that event, I have nothing at this point other than just getting into kind of peeling back the layers and seeing what happened over there so we can give them an opinion of do we see a violation? Do we see any type of a criminal charge coming out of that. But I don't have any information as far as what the result of that will be.
How would that be considered a conflict of interest in their department, other than that some of the protesters were related?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Is there was some possible ties between some of the protesters and some other people within the city.
And they decided then that that would be something that outside eyes would be more apt to be less.
Yeah, I think when you do that, you take away any questions of was there any type of a bias or favoritism based on having some sort of a personal connection, to either a suspect in a case or a victim in a case. It's something that's fairly common across law enforcement, and honestly, I think it promotes transparency, and it promotes the idea that the department is really trying to look at this objectively and make the right decision. So,
It seems like in today's world there's a this and that sides, and as law enforcement is not immune. You live among us. You're, families. I know your family, and you go to school. You have kids, and it's not immune that people would have opinions, and within your family, not necessarily yours, but it's common. We've been talking for years about how getting a Thanksgiving dinner together or a family reunion can be what are we going to do if type of thing.
yeah, depending on what side of the political spectrum you're on, I think all families deal with that, and we do the same. Our obligation to the community is to set those things aside when we're out there and not use that as any type of a mediating factor in any of our decisions, and I believe we do very well at that in our department.
Now, Minneapolis was the epicenter of an incident here that kind of sparked the whole issue across the country. Do you, as a department now, share? Do they send you things? I mean, is there within the unions or within the law enforcement? I would think education. You go to technical school to be, and there's accreditations to become a law enforcement that you look for on applications that you take. As you're teaching this career to someone, looking at what's happened and getting video and getting the breakdown, if you will, from other law enforcement people as to how things went, maybe things could have been handled. I mean, I don't know what they teach necessarily, other than show you what happened and then say, how could we have handled this better? I don't know if that's a teaching method or if that's just simply a...
Well, I think it's absolutely a teaching method, and I don't know. I've not heard anything to suggest that there was some training as far as that technique goes. I really couldn't speak to that. From the greater opinion of, I'll speak to my opinion. There was nothing in that should have been trained, even if it was. I mean, that was a very, very bad scenario, and I don't think you're going to find any law enforcement officer that's going to support what he did. On the flip side, we have an obligation to learn from people like that. And one of the challenges is, do you go back and do you say, was it a failure to train with this officer? And again, I can't answer that. But what I can tell you is that I have no issue showing that to a new officer or a seasoned officer, an officer of 25 years, and saying, learn from this. Don't be this person, because really what this individual did was set our profession back, countless years as far as our public, what the public believes in us. So it's just a real tragic situation that law enforcement as a whole does not support in any way, shape, or form. And we've got to learn from it. We've got to take that and move forward and make sure that people don't do those things.
Talking with Marshfield Assistant Police Chief Pat Zepps here on today's Insight program, 384-2191, 384-2192, live on this second Friday in the month of June. And it's, I would say, impossible to sidestep what's been going on, and your department was active in actually being interactive with the citizens of the community, trying to, as you said, set things straight here as opposed to the setbacks that we've had, even with people who weren't involved and who've only seen this.
Right.
Is this something is this the way you train? Is this the way, are you told to do this? Is this something that you're shown? And like you said, it's been somewhat of a setback, so now you're having to come back to the local people here and say, that's not something that we would, as part of our training, do.
And how do you, that's the type of confidence in the public that you have to instill, is that God forbid something like that happen, that's not something we're going to train, condone, or teach somebody to do. And so we really need to work on rebuilding that trust that there is no place for that in law enforcement. You could get into many areas of the breakdown and the failures that happen there. But our job moving forward is to make the public realize that we as a department, we're not going to tolerate that type of behavior, and we're going to do everything to make sure that that doesn't happen, whether it's through training, experience. And, you and I both know you can learn a lot from looking at how things are poorly handled. And that's important too, as we've got to learn from it and we've got to move forward. But we also have to make the community know that we don't stand for what happened there.
The news headline earlier this week was also that chokeholds were now going to be made illegal.
Yeah.
As if that was something that was a technique that was to be used earlier.
Yeah, and again, it's very difficult to speak to what other departments have as far as their policies and training. I know historically there were some types of holds that were allowed or trained for very brief amounts of time, that's centered around the neck, the carotid artery. State of Wisconsin currently doesn't have anything like that, so nothing in that is trained in our department.
What I find, I don't know if I'd say, it's hard to say amusing in this situation, but kids will party and do that to each other just for giggles.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, what are you doing? They'll choke each other out or, with belts or with their arms or with, this is somebody's idea of fun and amusement. I don't understand.
I don't know. That was never in my realm of friends, types of things. But I mean, kids wrestle. I mean, they're...
Well, they see it on professional wrestling, and it's fun, I guess.
And they don't realize that that's fake.
Yeah, there's actually hopefully nobody getting hurt, or that the possibility of getting hurt is minimized with those guys.
Right, and I think the real unfortunate part there is whatever you think you need to do to control that subject, he was, in my professional opinion, he was controlled. At that point, that particular move should have been stopped if he thought that that was an appropriate move to begin with. I think one of your biggest problems is one, that he felt that that was an appropriate way to control the subject after he really didn't need to be controlled. And so the hard part is, how do you explain this to the youth? You go back to what they see. And I think that's one of the harder parts is, even being a law enforcement officer, if my kids see that, I tell them that's not defendable. That was a awful mistake or an intentional mistake. We don't know that. But it wasn't good, and there's no defending it.
Well, in talking with Assistant Chief Pat Zepps here of Marshfield PD on a regular monthly visit, it's tough for you because all you can do is give your opinion, and everybody wants to construe that as a basis of law enforcement. And each person you talk to, every chief that they interview on TV or wherever on radio, is of a different opinion, and you're all thinking that I would never do that. But as a department now, they're talking about reducing methods, and you can't be as aggressive, and you can't be, they're coming up with new, even to the point where now I believe they called it defunding police departments. I mean, how is the morale on that when you hear about how things are? I mean, it can shake down even to this far.
It can, and I don't know how you operate. For example, in the state of Wisconsin, every officer has to receive 24 hours of training a year. There is a reimbursement on the state side, but if you don't get that, you could be decertified. With our department, we've got a good training budget, and I think that that's helped us, and that really shows to the quality of officers we're trying to put out there. When you start talking about defunding the police, and there's different theories of what exactly that means. Do you allocate money that originally went to the police to go somewhere else to shore up social programs? I don't know that you're going to find anybody who would disagree that social programs could use more money. But I can't sit here and tell you that they're going to get the results by taking that away from, for example, police training or reducing the number of officers on the street. I mean, those are really the tough questions that are going to come out of that, defunding the police.
There are people in Marshfield who think that there are too many police officers.
It just means we're out there and they see us.
Yeah, you look at it as, well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But they think, well, every time I turn around, there's somebody out there who is watching.
Right.
I guess, there's a gotcha factor here.
Right. I guess the best way to address that is that it ebbs and flows, I think, with the amount of activity. And we're an active department. And I truly believe that, for example, heavy traffic enforcement, if that's what you're referring, well, there's always somebody pulled over on Central. Well, it's been proven that heavy traffic enforcement is a major deterrent. Presence, people seeing the police. We'll never know how many individuals were out at a given night, saw a couple traffic stops, and decided better of whatever criminal activity they were going to engage in. Those are statistics we don't have, but what we can say is that community presence and that visibility tends to drive down crime.
Talking with Assistant Chief Pat Zepps here on the Inside program this second Friday in the month of June. I heard today that there is a program that's being funded for like a click it or ticket type program for central Wisconsin, all of the departments.
Yeah, what that is that's the state will provide some grant incentives to get out there and enforce seatbelts. And a lot of that comes from the belief that seatbelts save lives. So what they're really looking for is a period of time, and we'll put something out to the media that says during this particular time, we're going to move towards a no leniency when it comes to a seatbelt ticket. And really all that is to just enhance and promote seatbelt use. I
find that, I don't want to say harassing, but to a certain extent, it's a law. Mm-hmm. It's gone from a preference to a law now. So there's no gray area here as to whether or not you should or shouldn't.
Right.
But at some point, that's not a primary, but it is.
It is a primary offense, yes.
And that's the difference, is that, to me, that's, I don't think it should have been, but that's like the helmet law or anything else that we have. I mean, these people from California come here and going, Jesus, there's nobody wearing helmets.
Right. Yeah, and that is that's one of the big questions is, and that I've even heard that on the road when I was making stops. Well, if I have to wear a seatbelt, why doesn't he have to wear a helmet? And I don't have a good answer for you for that. That has to deal with the legislation and the statutes. They did move some time ago, like you said, they moved the seatbelt as a secondary violation, which means you couldn't stop somebody for it. For example, if you stopped somebody for speed and they didn't have a seatbelt on, you could enforce that violation. Now, if you see somebody without a seatbelt on, it's been that way for some time, you can stop. As far as why there's not a helmet law, that's a good question.
Well, it's all about the lobbyists. The Abate has a good lobbyer. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them, yep.
Probably. I don't know. Well, no, but to me, I've always said, well, that seatbelt, that just is an idea so you can get a sniff when you come up there as to, do I smell alcohol? Do I smell marijuana? Do I smell, what else can we find here?
Well, some might call that good police work. I mean, if you're stopping a violation that you have reasonable suspicion to stop and you're keyed on to something else, I think that's a fairly effective use of a traffic stop. One, because you are finding somebody might be intoxicated. And there are people who get arrested for operating while under influence for not wearing a seatbelt. So, I guess there's two ways to look at that. Is it a reason to make a stop? Well, it's a good stop. And if you're a legitimate purpose and there's a reasonable suspicion to stop that car, and it leads to something else. Other violations do that as well. I mean, I could stop somebody for speed, running a red light. I could stop somebody for a broken tail light.
That was the famous one.
Yeah, it's still out there. I mean, all I had was a broken tail light, but you were also intoxicated. So is it wrong to stop somebody that and find a drunk driver? And that's good police work.
Talking with Assistant Chief Pat Zepps here, Marshfield Police Department, on today's Inside program on AM 1450 WDLB. We'll continue in just a moment. AM 1450 WDLB's Inside program for the second Friday in June. You know that if you're listening live, you may be watching us here in video. Marshfield Media Access, talking with Assistant Police Chief Pat Zepps from the Marshfield PD here on today's program. And certainly no lack of things to talk about, but the conversation keeps going back in the same direction all the time, and that is what's happening in the world of policing today. And we talked about how you've been proactive here by having an event to invite the public to and try to be humanizing the badge, as you say. Let's go to the phone. Gary, go ahead. You're on the air.
Yes. good morning. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the management and members of the local police department in Marshfield because they made the televised news from Wausau, came down and broadcast some events that were going on here, and that puts a feather in the guy's cap down here, and people admire us for being here. But that's not what I called, but thanks for that effort.
Thank you.
But I wanted to highlight a situation I'm sure you're aware of, but what's going to be done, or what can be done, not much is going on there. It's with the traffic flow coming into Marshfield, basically from a Spencer direction. I'm talking Highway 13, high-speed traffic here. We're talking NASCAR wannabes almost, and there's danger there, and it's just a matter of time before it turns very deadly. Especially, I'm thinking of in fog or bad weather or something. And you've got multiple jurisdictions there with the county change, and the Marshfield police are going to be on their turf, and people know at the stoplights you better slow down. But I know this happens, and I know before you get to that point, there are times it's probably going 65 or 70 in Marathon County with no patrol from Marathon County in that area. It's just something.
Kind of remind us or point out where those hot spots are. What I can also tell you is, there are times where officers are going to another call or doing something where they don't have an opportunity to stop that
No, I'm talking to him.
car. But what we do is we put out a problem-oriented policing request, and what that does is it puts officers in the particular area that we need to pay attention to. And I think up there we've had some work up there. We do have some grants going on specifically for that highway, also on North 97 in the city of Marshfield. So what you're going to see is an increased police presence there over the next probably 3 months until that task force grant ends. But after that, we have an obligation to continue to monitor it. But there will be some increased presence up there via a Marathon County task force.
It wouldn't, from a citizen standpoint, hurt to put more signs up.
Yeah.
Along that area, so that when I had to laugh, I got a call on the Inside program. It's been a few years, but when you get on Lincoln over toward 14th, when you get by the school there, they must have had too many signs or something, because there was you get like a picket fence. There was so many signs in that area. And then you get to other places like this, and I look up, and I should have a place where at any given time I can look up and see one.
Right.
I know you can't make a fence out of it, but I mean, there should be times when, or even the flashing system that you use of where you put some mobile speed check out there.
Yep. Yeah, and those are typically complaint-based, those electronic speed signs. So what I would tell the community is that if you see a hot spot or you see a concern, by all means call us. We'll spend some time down there. If we can get a speed sign down there, we will. As far as the permanent signs, we'll also look at those. We're a great point of contact, and we'll work with the city as far as do we need to increase some signage there. So those are all great things to bring to our attention, and by all means call if there's a place you think that speed sign would be of value.
In this area, that is that's in Marathon County, right? I mean, north of McMillan by the viaduct is Marathon County.
Yep, correct.
So that would be something that the sheriff's department there is going to have to handle, because that's not under a township. Well, McMillan, but I don't.
Right.
Do they have an officer?
The township of McMillan does not. No, that's covered by Marathon County. And so when I reference that task force grant, what that is it's whatever law enforcement agency in Marathon County, Marshfield by virtue of being partially in Marathon County could participate. to where the state awards us funds to put extra officers out there specifically for offenses like speed, OWI, things like that. So, and we are geographically bound to a couple of highways, so you're going to see some increased presence there.
Veterans Parkway sure has made it nice and smooth, though, to go.
Yeah.
I mean, from one part of the city to the other.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring in News Director Mike Warren from the newsroom.
Okay, Pat, quick question.
Sure.
This is a right-of-way question. So I'm referencing 4th and Peach now because that's the one that comes to mind.
Yep.
Before they redid that, there was no right turn lane,
Okay.
right?
Well, you're asking me to
Coming
go back a
off
ways.
of, let's see, if I'm going west on 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have a right turn lane.
To go north on Peach.
Correct.
Yep.
Who has the right of way? The person turning right onto Peach or a left hand, somebody wanting to make a left hand turn from eastbound 4th?
That would depend. I believe that the person turning left would have the right of way if they have that green light. I'd have to recall if there's a yield sign there or not.
On
Going
westbound
west,
4th,
right,
yeah.
right. If there's a yield sign there, then they're always going to yield to that right of way. Other than if there's not, then that right turn is going to have the right of way over the left.
Yeah, because I've been taking it recently, and I noticed there were, there was some confusion watching basically both motorists stop for each other.
Sure.
So I was just wondering who in that situation, because it would seem to me the most logical, right of way would be the person making the right turn.
And it would be if there's not some other signage there. And again, I'd have to kind of run through there, which is odd because I run that route every day. And now I'm trying to think, is there a yield sign there?
I know. I haven't noticed either if there's
It becomes
one or
normal.
not.
I guess we go back to Jeff's comment about more signage. Does it really help?
I'm just probably asking a question that maybe other people thought of in their mind too. But,
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
To be determined.
Yes.
Yeah, based on signage.
Oh, okay. So if there's a yield sign, we have to stop for the person making that left-hand turn.
Correct.
Off of 4th onto northbound Peach.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
All right.
correct, yep.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, I think I'll have to go to Steve Sells here over at Driver Education Academy here and get the DEA involved.
Yeah. Take a look at that intersection.
And well, because there are questions, in Wisconsin, we don't have to do a driver's test over and over in order to get renewals.
Right.
So you just presume that you're being courteous, and whoever, you'll let them go. I mean, it's not worth wrecking the car, they all saying.
And we get a lot of questions as far as if you're waved through by somebody who actually has the right of way. Should you do that or should you not? That's all kind of based on opinion. If I have the right of way and somebody's waving me through to violate that, you still technically could still be at fault there, even though somebody's waving you through. It doesn't trump what the traffic laws are.
I saw somebody get driven up into a house on the corner when the cars were all stopped, a long line.
Sure.
And the guy left the intersection open. And he waved the guy through, and he didn't see the guy coming the other way.
Right.
And he went between the two cars to get through the line of traffic that was backed up. And pow, he went right up into the house.
You gotta be careful when you're waving somebody through because there'd be some culpability there.
Yeah, there would be. Well, thank you for stopping by
You
here
bet.
today. Tough time here and hard questions. They'll be around for a while, I think.
That's all right.
But talking with Assistant Chief Pat Zepps, Marshfield PD, here on this second Friday in the month of June on AM 1450 WDLB's Insight program. We will also have on Fridays the County Board Chairman Lance Plimmel will be in. The Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker takes his rotation, as does Marshfield Mayor Bob McManus here on the Insight program Fridays every month. And on the fifth Friday, I think in July, we'll see if we can't get another city department official in here to talk with as well on the Insight program.
Your hometown radio station.